Hello, and welcome to DarkTrailz, the place where you are guided into mesmerizing stories designed to help you unwind and drift into sleep. Tonight, we travel far from the warmth of your modern comforts into the brittle hush of a medieval winter. The snow outside your hovel is not picturesque, and the cold that grips your bones is not a passing chill. You are not nobility, not a knight, not even a merchant with coin and choice. You are a peasant, and your name is known only to those who share your hearth, if any remain. The famine has begun. You probably won't survive this, at least not without questioning everything you thought you knew. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I would love to know where you are listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. It begins not with a blizzard, but with a whisper. The kind that comes through the cracks in your roof on a morning that smells like frozen soil and dying wood. Your fingers are curled around a bit of coarse wool blanket that still carries warmth from the night, and you hold still for a moment, listening. Outside, the world creaks. Ice has gripped the beams of the shed, and you can hear it shift ever so slightly with the wind, like an old man's breath before he dies. Winter has come, not with drama but inevitability, and this year it has teeth. The village, your world, is quiet. That is never a good sign. Normally, there would be the crack of axes from the tree line, the grunt of livestock, children being told off for chasing chickens too close to the latrines. But now the silence feels like something sitting on your chest. Started weeks ago when the harvest failed. The wheat came up short, the barley brittle and dry. The beets and turnips rotted in the ground faster than you could pull them. The older villagers said it was because of the comet that crossed the sky last summer. Others whispered it was punishment, though they never agreed on what for. Perhaps for the Lord's new chapel, built with coin meant for seed, perhaps for old sins, perhaps it is just the way of things. The year is 1315, and across Europe, the Great Famine has begun. You do not know that term, you only know the aching in your stomach, and the way your mother used to look stronger when she did not think you were watching. This morning you rise slowly. There is no fire yet. Fuel has to be rationed. It is not that there is no wood, it is that the forest is not yours. Everything you touch, technically, belongs to the Lord whose keep looms over the hill like a crooked tooth. You were caught gathering fallen branches last week, and you still have the bruises from the steward's staff to prove it. So you burn dung when you can, and hope the smoke won't draw the bailiff's attention. Today you will go to the root cellar. You have put it off too long. You know it won't be good news. Your younger sister, Mare, watches you from the straw mat she calls a bed. She has not said much since the last snowfall. The cough in her chest has deepened. Still, she smiles when you look at her, and that is reason enough to keep pretending. You step outside into the brittle dawn. Your boots, such as they are, crack as you move. They were your father's once. Leather so worn it folds like cloth, stuffed with straw and hope. The air is sharp, biting, but you have felt worse. The snow crunches as you move toward the sunken slab that marks the root cellar. You pass the coop, now silent. The hens were eaten in late autumn, one by one, until only feathers and silence remained. The door of the cellar groans. You light a stub of candle. Grease and tallow scraped from meat that feels like a memory, and descend. The stench hits first, mold, wet earth, and something else, something wrong. You hesitate, then move forward, using your hand to guide you against the rough stone. The baskets are there. You would left them half full, hopeful that something might last. You lift the cloth from the first and find rot, black mush where beets once sat. You try the next. A few potatoes remain, soft and sprouting pale tendrils like ghost fingers. They will have to do. You count for maybe 5 if you cut away the bad parts. There is a small jar of salt pork, the fat risen and cloudy. It was hidden behind a broken beam. You did not put it there. Your heart sinks. Someone else has been here. As you ascend, your candle flickers out. You do not bother relighting it. The gray daylight has crept in, enough to guide you back to the hut. You do not tell Mare what you found. Instead, you say you will make stew tonight, a little lie to keep her smiling. She nods, tucks her hands under the blanket, and hums the tune your mother used to sing. You wonder how many other villagers are humming that song now, pretending not to be afraid. Out in the square, people gather near the post. It is not a market day. You follow warily. The steward is there, mounted and cloaked in fur too fine for his face. He unrolls a parchment and begins to shout the new ration orders. Half flour portions, no grain, meat only on saints' days, if any. The penalty for hoarding is public flogging or worse. There is murmuring, of course, but not resistance. That came last month when old Farron refused to hand over his goat. The goat is gone now. So is Farron. The well remembers. Behind you, someone mutters that this winter is cursed, that the sun itself has been stolen by the devil. You turn. It is Elswith, the midwife. Her hands tremble with cold, but her eyes are sharp as ever. Watch the birds, she says softly. They know what is coming. You look up. There are no birds. Not one. No crows, no sparrows. Not even the red-breasted robin that used to visit the window each frost. The sky is empty, and for a moment so is your breath. Later that evening, you visit the carpenter's shed, hoping to beg some splinters or scraps for fuel. Rurik, the carpenter, eyes you from his bench, where he carves without passion. He offers nothing but a shrug. The snow's coming hard tonight, he says. Best sleep with stones by the hearth. They hold warmth longer than flesh. You thank him, unsure if it was meant kindly or cruelly. On your way back, you pass the chapel. The priest is inside, lighting candles for no one. The door is ajar, and you catch his voice, whispering to a statue of Saint Bridget. His words are in Latin, but the tone is desperation. Even the holy are hungry. When night comes, it is not just cold, it is hollow. The wind slips through every crack, like fingers seeking your skin. You huddle with Mare, your body curled around hers. Your breath shallow and still sweet with memory of warm bread from a harvest 5 years gone. You dream of apples, ripe and golden, falling from trees you have never seen. And when you wake to the sound of your own stomach growling, you realize the true cruelty of famine is not death, but the hope that lingers just long enough to hurt. The morning arrives without light. You open your eyes not because the sun wakes you, but because your ribs ache from the hardness of the floor and the hunger gnawing from the inside out. Mare is still asleep, or maybe she is just conserving energy in that way quiet children learn to do when their bodies are trying to survive more than speak. The air inside the hut is colder than it should be, and when you touch the wall, frost clings to the inside, not just the outer beams. You press your thumb to it, watch the small circle of warmth form and fade, then reach for your cloak, the one that used to be lined but has been picked over by years of moths, fleas, and borrowed time. Today you must go back to the cellar, not for food, but for something worse. You hit a set of old bindings there. Rope and a rusted hook, back when you were younger and thought trapping rabbits would be a seasonal lark. Now those bindings might mean the difference between Mare having broth or another day of coughing through her dreams. You slip them into your pouch and head toward the treeline, where the snow hangs thicker, untouched by footsteps, which is already a bad sign. The animals know better, or they are gone. Past the ridge, there is a line of tracks. Small, but too erratic to be fox or hare. You follow them, boots cracking the frost, until you reach the little rise where the old goat pen used to be, before the villagers tore it down for firewood. And there it is, half buried in snow. A set of disturbed prints leading straight to the remains of your woodpile. You do not remember stacking it like that. Something's been here. Your gut clenches, not from fear but calculation. It is not the cold that will kill you this year. It is math. How many days of food left? How many nights of warmth owed to Mare? How many bones your hands can still carry back to the hut without shaking? You kneel beside the snow pile and find the edge of a leather scrap. It is not yours. You pull slowly, quietly, and lift free a chewed bit of hide, part of a binding strap, the kind used for goats or small sheep. It has been gnawed through, and next to it, faint but unmistakable, are prints, human, barefoot, or close to it. Toes splayed unnaturally wide. You freeze, ears straining. The woods are silent. You do not want to believe what you see. But the old tales about the hollow ones who walk the woods in times of famine surface like bruises under pale skin. You turn back. By midday, the village is louder. Hungry people make more noise than fed ones. Ironically, they argue about measurements, accuse each other of hiding grain, whisper accusations behind red noses and cracked lips. One man, Tomas, is dragging a sled with nothing on it but 2 frozen rats and a broken pot. He walks straight back like he is carrying roast venison. Pride is more stubborn than frostbite. In the corner of the square, Ellsworth and the blacksmith's boy argue over a pot of snow that one claims is cursed and the other insists is just frozen stew. The snow's still falling. It always falls softer when things go worst. By evening, you return to the hut with nothing caught. But a decision made that night, you wake to a noise. Not the wind, something heavier. A thud against the far wall. Then another. Mare stirs beside you but does not wake. You rise carefully, pick up a long stick you have been saving. One of the last with weight to it, and edge toward the door. The moon is out, too bright for comfort. The thuds stop. You press an eye to the crack between boards. Nothing moves. Then something does, a flicker of shadow low to the ground. Slipping past the edge of your vision like a rat, but heavier, slower, deliberate. You unlatch the door and step out, breath fogging. The yard is empty, but in the snow. Footprints, not animal, not booted, bare, long-toed, deep. You follow them until the edge of the yard, where they vanish as if the thing leapt or dissolved or was never really there. You step back inside, shut the door, and shove the bench across it. Just in case fear is right and memory is weak. Sleep does not return easily. The next morning, you are summoned. A bell rings in the square, not for mass, not for fire. For judgment, someone has been caught stealing. You gather with the rest near the church post. It is Rurik, the carpenter. His face is swollen from frost, and he is kneeling in the snow, hands bound, eyes downcast. The steward reads from the scroll, declares the crime, grain taken from the Lord's storehouse, and not just any grain, seed grain. The village murmurs, that is nearly sacred. To steal seed is to steal spring. Rurik does not speak in his defense. He just looks toward his daughter, who sobs behind Ellsworth's cloak. The punishment is swift, and not fatal, but nearly 10 lashes. In this cold, the wounds might not clot. The priest watches, lips moving in prayer or perhaps just counting. After you approach Rurik's daughter, her name is Lyra. She is your age, more or less, though these days no one looks their age. He did it for you, you say softly. She does not answer, just stares at the ground where blood soaks the snow like wine on a saint's feast. We all would, you add, not because it is true, but because maybe it should be. She nods just once, then slips away without a word. You do not see her again that day. In the evening, Mare asks you where the goat went. You forgot she would even noticed it was missing. You say it probably ran off into the woods. She shakes her head. Goats do not leave home. Not unless something calls them. You look at her like what? She shrugs, a gesture too old for a girl her size. The stories. That night, you do not sleep. You sharpen the stick into a point. Then another. There is a fact most people forget about medieval Europe. Not all famine is about absence. Sometimes there is food, just not for you. The nobles still eat. The clergy have cellars. Even the merchants who've stopped traveling manage to keep dried fish from the coast. But peasants, like you, live in the in-between, where food exists but only on the other side of walls, laws, and guarded gates. The injustice is not in the hunger, but in the proximity to relief. That is the part that keeps you awake. That, and the footprints. You hear movement outside again, and you do not want to go look, but you will, you always will. You wake with a jolt, not from a dream, but from absence, the kind of silence that feels too complete, as if even the wind is holding its breath. Mare is not beside you. The blanket lies flat, still warm, which means she has only just left. Your pulse quickens, and you do not bother with boots. You grab your cloak and the sharpened stick. Fling open the door, and are greeted by a world muted in snowfall. No prints in the yard, not even yours until you step out. The sky is still dark gray, pre-dawn, but bright enough for you to see the faint shimmer of a trail. Mare's small feet, bare, aim toward the woods. Your heart clenches like a fist. How did she leave without a sound? Why would she go? And then you remember the goat, the stories. Something calling. You follow her tracks quickly, the cold biting at your legs, the stick held firm in your hand as if it might explain anything at all. Deeper into the woods, past the spot where you would seen the gnawed leather, where the snow hangs heavier on the branches, and the light is even thinner. You start to call her name, but stop. afraid to draw attention not just from predators but from things you do not name because names give shape. And shape gives power, instead you listen. For anything, for crying or crunching or laughter that should not be there. And eventually you find them, prints, mares, and next to them, larger ones not booted. But not barefoot either, as if wrapped in something wrong, wide and dragging and long-heeled. Like an animal trying too hard to walk like a man, you crouch, brush snow aside, and find a smear of something dark. Not blood, not quite, more like sap. If sap could carry sickness, you stand and move faster, stick raised. Then pause, in the distance, a voice, mares, humming the old song again, but slow, too slow. Stretched like dough, you break into a run, crashing through low branches and deep snowdrifts until you see her, standing still at the edge of a small glade, her nightdress white as the snow. Hair tangled, her eyes fixed on a tree, not just any tree. An old one, older than the others, its bark blackened as if struck by lightning long ago, and its branches bare despite the season, as if it rejects even snow. Mare does not turn as you approach, does not flinch when you reach her and take her hand. It is cold, too cold, but she lets you lead her back without resistance. She whispers only one thing as you leave the glade. "I knew I was hungry too," and you do not ask what she means. Not yet. Back in the hut, you build the fire higher than you should, using wood you would promise to save, because the cold in Mare's limbs is not just weather. It is something deeper. She sleeps again, and you sit guard, watching the door, the windows, listening. Outside, the snow continues, as if nothing has happened, as if everything has. The next day, the steward returns, this time with a new scroll, a new decree. Rationing has been revised again. A visiting bishop has convinced the Lord to tighten stores in the name of piety. Fasting is holy, he claims, and those with less shall be blessed. More, the crowd groans, someone throws a lump of ice, it misses, but the steward has his guards with him this time, and they do not miss. One man gets a cracked lip, another a broken wrist, and no one speaks again. As you listen, you catch a word repeated, bartering. The steward mentions a new system, a means to exchange what little people have for credit, not in coin but in tally sticks. Wooden markers carved with notches, an old method even then, but now returning, not just for trade, but for control. Every notch registered at the chapel, every favor owed to the Lord's steward, feels less like trade and more like slow surrender. You think of the bindings in your cellar, of the sharpened sticks by your hearth, and you feel your stomach turn. That night, you visit the tanner, old Brad, who smells of lie and regret. You bring a scrap of wool and a bit of salt, hoping to trade for anything, even strips of hide to boil for broth. He eyes you, snorts, and says he will trade only for bone. Not antler, but bone, long and clean, the kind from something that listened before it died, he adds, and laughs, a joke maybe or not. You leave empty-handed, except for the knowledge that the hunger has changed the rules, not just of trade but of meaning. People speak slower now, watching each other longer before they answer, as if waiting to measure your soul for weight. The next morning, you notice something strange near the edge of the village. An arrangement of twigs, tied with strips of cloth. In a circular pattern, you do not touch it, but later you see another one near the chapel's back wall. Then a third near the well. Some children say it is a charm to keep the cold away. Others say it is to mark the ones who still have food. No one admits to making them, but no one removes them either. When Mare wakes that night with fever, you soak rags and whisper songs. And she clutches your hand tighter than she has in weeks. Through chapped lips, she murmurs again, "It is still hungry," and you wish she meant herself, but her eyes are wide open, fixed on the door, and you do not look, you just wait for morning. And wonder if the tree is still there, and whether it ever was not. The village is growing quieter in ways that do not belong to winter. It is not just the cold muffling footsteps or the snow silencing carts. It is something else. Something internal. People speak less when they pass each other. They nod without eye contact. They carry burdens not just in their arms but in their glances. Old resentments are returning like mice to an empty granary, and you feel it first when you go to draw water and find the bucket gone. Not misplaced but taken. The rope still there, frayed at the end. Someone had cut it. You look around and see no one, but you hear the creak of a shutter closing. You go back to the hut with only snow in your arms, which you melt slowly in the cracked pot above the fire. And Mare does not even ask where it came from. She is quieter now too. Not out of weakness, but watchfulness, like something in her has aligned itself with the season. You try to distract her, Tell her stories from before the famine, about the time the cow got stuck in the chapel doorway, or when the twins smeared ash on the priest's robes. But even as you speak, you realize those stories feel like they happened to someone else, someone full-bellied and foolish and soft. The air in the village now feels carved, as if everything has been stripped down to bone, and even smiles must be earned by loss. You see it next when you visit the baker's shed, not for bread, there is none, but to ask if she still has flour for barter. Her name is Hilda, and once she gave you warm crusts when you would help her sweep ash from the ovens. Now she answers with the door barely open, her hair wrapped tight, her sleeves rolled high to show she is hiding nothing. I have nothing. She says, not for you, not for God, and she closes the door before you can ask what she meant. Outside, in the slush near her threshold, you see a mark drawn with ash, a circle with 2 lines through it, like a cross tied with string. It is not holy, at least not in any book the priest reads, but you have seen it now 4 times this week, once near the granary, once behind the tanners, once scratched faintly into the dirt beside the well. No one talks about it. But no one wipes it away. Mare sees it too. When you return home, she draws it in the condensation on the window, then wipes it before you can scold her. It means the watchers, she says, the ones who come when no one shares. And you feel a chill that has nothing to do with wind. You ask where she learned that, and she just shrugs. Later, you ask Elswith, the midwife, who is older than anyone else in the village, and remembers winters even worse than this one. She does not laugh when you mention the symbol. She only says, some things survive famine better than people, and then walks off with a bundle of roots tucked under her arm. That night, at the fire, Mare speaks again, her voice flat. I heard them talking. You ask who, and she says, the family in the next hut, which confuses you because that hut has been empty for weeks, ever since they left to beg at the manor gates and never came back. You press her gently, and she insists. They were whispering about Hilda, said she had flour buried in her mattress. They said they would take it the next morning. You see the result. Hilda's door is hanging open, and smoke is rising faintly from the ashes of her floor. The hut did not burn down, not fully, but enough to scar the walls and blacken the roof. Beams, no one is inside, no one speaks of it. No one asks questions, and when you mention her name aloud, Tomas glances over and makes the sign of the cross with his left hand. The wrong hand, the one you use when you are afraid the right won't be enough. Mare says nothing, but she does not draw the symbol again, and you are not sure if that is better or worse. Later that week, a fight breaks out over firewood. 2 boys from opposite ends of the village clash in the square, throwing fists not for pride but for splinters. One gets a tooth knocked out, the other a broken finger, and the steward, who watches from his horse, merely records the scuffle in a notebook. No punishments, no warnings, just observation, as if he is collecting data, and you wonder what kind of tally they are keeping behind the manor's stone walls, if they are counting who is still useful, who is getting weak, who might trade honor for grain. You feel it in yourself too, that creeping inventory of what you would offer to keep Mare breathing, your boots, your last button shirt. Your name. One night, Mare wakes you with a question. What would you trade for fire that never goes out? You think she is dreaming, but her eyes are wide open, reflecting the last glow of the coals. Depends what it costs, you answer carefully. What if it cost remembering your own name, she asks, and you want to say no, of course not, but you do not speak because some part of you is not sure anymore. That night you dream of the old tree. Again, but this time it is moving, bending not in wind but with breath, slow and wet and heavy, and beneath it, a shape sits, too tall, arms too long, head tilted as if listening. You wake with sweat on your skin despite the freezing air, and Mare is already up, sitting at the window, watching the woods, not afraid, just waiting. Firewood burns faster when your mind is crowded. You sit beside the hearth, watching the last log crackle into red. The smell is comforting, or it would be if you did not know how few pieces remain. Mare is quiet again, not asleep, but somewhere in that drifting half-state she often slips into now. Her eyes fixed on nothing, her mouth slightly open, and every so often she hums, not a melody exactly, but something like a forgotten lullaby being remembered wrong. You do not interrupt her, partly because she stops if you do, partly because it scares you when she looks directly at you afterward, like she is not entirely sure who you are or who she is. Outside, the wind has changed. It whistles through the slats with a note higher than usual, and you remember what the priest once said, that on certain nights, the wind carries the voices of the dead trying to come back through the wrong doors. You laugh then, but now you check the latch twice, then stuff rags in the corners. As if linen and resolve can stop spirits, you need distraction. So you pull out the only entertainment you have left, your memory, stories your mother used to tell. Not the clean kind for feast days, but the strange ones, the kind whispered when the moon was full and the shutters were drawn. You begin with the tale of the Salt King, a man who lived in a mountain and wept brine until it poisoned the wells of 7 villages. He was defeated not by a knight, but by a girl who sang him a song so sad that he drowned himself in his own tears. Mare listens, not moving, but you think she hears it. Next, the one about the star thief, a man who captured stars in glass bottles and sold them to lords to keep them warm during the longest winters, until a beggar boy broke the jars and gave the light back to the sky. Finally, you tell the story of the ash-hearted bride, a woman who married a lord and slowly turned to cinders every night, until her husband saw her true name written in the fire and kissed her into memory. You do not remember how that one ends, but Mare does. She never came back, only the fire stayed. She says softly, then returns to silence. Later, you visit the chapel, not for prayer, but for shelter. The stone is cold, but the air does not move, which is more than you can say for the hut some nights. The priest is there, of course, always there now, watching the candles as if waiting for one to whisper a secret. He nods when you enter, gestures to the bench, no sermon. Just presence. After a while, he speaks. They say stories keep us fed when bread runs out. You nod. Not sure if he means it literally or not, but there are stories that should never be remembered, he adds, and you know exactly which ones he means, the old tales. The ones about the watchers in the woods, the lights that move under snow, the tree that drinks sorrow and grows taller each time a name is forgotten. You mention the symbols. The bundles, the ash circles. He looks away. I burn what I find, he says simply. But fire does not unmake memory. It only reminds it. You ask if he has ever seen them. The watchers, the pale ones, the hunger that walks. He does not answer, but the tremble in his hands tells you. Enough. When you return home, Mare is waiting with a question. Do you believe in warmth that does not come from fire? You want to say yes because it sounds kind. But you say no because lies feel heavier now. She nods, then asks another, do you think the tree can remember people? And this time you do not know how to answer because part of you wants to say it remembers everyone. And part of you hopes it remembers no one. That night, something strange happens. You hear laughter, not from Mare, not from the woods, but from the square, light and quick. Followed by the clinking of something metal, you rise cautiously and peek out. There, by the well, a small group of children are dancing, 3 of them, maybe 4, all thin as fence posts and wearing clothes too light for the frost. But their cheeks are red, and their eyes bright, and they spin in circles like it is midsummer. You almost step out, but something holds you back. Then one of them pauses and turns toward your hut. And you see their face is wrong, not monstrous, not bloody, just slightly blurred. As if your eyes refuse to focus, the child smiles, then skips back into the circle. You close the shutter, double bar it, and do not sleep. The next day, no one mentions children. You ask Tomas if he saw them. He just grunts. The blacksmith says nothing. Els with only raises one eyebrow and says, children are stories waiting to be told. Best not tell them twice, and walks off with her herbs. That night, Mare asks if the fire dreams, and you say no, but she says, then what does it whisper when we sleep? And you do not answer because now that you think of it, the fire has been whispering. Just a little, just enough. You wake to the sound of hooves, not galloping, but a slow, deliberate trot, heavy and wet on the packed snow outside. You rise without thinking, grab your stick. Though by now it is more habit than hope. Mare is sitting upright already, wide-eyed, staring at the door. You move slowly toward the shutter and crack it open. The morning is dim. Gray sky stretched taut above the village like a damp cloth. And there in the snow, near the well, stands the steward, his cloak dusted white, his horse thick with breath. Beside him are 2 guards and a sled, not loaded with grain or kindling, but with what looks like a bundle covered in sackcloth. Villagers gather without being called. Hunger teaches obedience. The steward announces that the Lord is imposing a new tax. A tithe not of coin but of resource, goats, chickens, even dried herbs, anything with nourishment or trade value must be surrendered. For redistribution, he says, but no one believes him. Someone mutters, for the manor table. And someone else shushes them quickly. The steward points at the bundle on the sled, and one of the guards pulls the cloth back. It is a goat, frozen solid, its eyes open. Stiff legs bent like crooked sticks. This, says the steward, was found outside the north fence. He does not say whose fence, but everyone knows it was yours. You feel the eyes on you. Tomas furrows his brow. Els with leans subtly toward the priest. Rurik's daughter, Lyra, bites her lip. You do not say a word, because the steward is watching, waiting. Goats are not to be kept unreported. He says, failure to declare assets is theft from the crown. He gestures to his guards, who move toward you. You stand still, heart pounding, but Mare steps forward first. Her voice clear. We had no goat. She says, it left weeks ago. One guard hesitates. Looks back at the steward, who frowns but waves them off. The tax will be taken another day. The sled turns, the hooves continue, and the villagers disperse, but the eyes remain. Watching, calculating, and you know that something has shifted. Later, in the hut, Mare sits silent while you pace. She finally says, that was not our goat, and you pause. What do you mean, you ask? She says, it did not die from cold. And you look at her, really look, because her voice is not frightened. It is certain, like she is describing a recipe or reciting a prayer. You ask how she knows. And she just says, its mouth was wrong, and you can't argue. Because you did not look closely enough. That night, you do not sleep, and neither does the fire. It flickers even when there is no draft, when the coals should be calm. They twist and jump like something's breathing into them. You remember what Mare asked, what does the fire whisper? And now you think maybe it is not whispering. Maybe it is listening. 3 days later, something else disappears, not food, not livestock, but old Tath, the man who used to sharpen tools behind the mill. No one notices for a while because he was not useful anymore, too old to swing an axe, too weak to walk far. He had no family left, no debts, no coin, just a cot by the chimney in a hut that always smelled like onions and ash. You notice first, because you see his door swinging in, the wind, and when you look inside, there is no sign of him. Just his boots by the fire, still warm, and a bowl of something gray on the table, half eaten. The spoon resting in it like a sleeping tongue. You step back out and tell Elswith, who shrugs. Maybe he wandered into the woods, she says, and you want to believe that, but no one wanders anymore, not unless they are taken or called. That night, Mare speaks again, her voice thin and tired. He told me a story once, she says, about a man who fed the fire wrong. Gave it bone instead of wood. You nod slowly. What happened, you ask? It started to remember him, she says, and it never let go. The next morning, someone's drawn another ash mark near your door. But this one is different, thicker, deeper, as if etched with something sharper than chalk. You rub it away with your boot. But the stain lingers faintly beneath, like a bruise under skin. You consider asking the priest about it, but he is not in the chapel, not that day, nor the next. On the third day he returns, pale and shivering, and says only, the woods are speaking again. Before retreating to his quarters without lighting a single candle, rumors bloom like mold. People begin whispering that the famine is not just hunger, but cleansing, that some force beyond the crown or church has come to claim balance. The steward doubles the watches, sets curfews, and orders anyone found outside after dusk to be flogged. But people still vanish, not in screams, just in absence. No blood, no signs, only emptiness. It becomes superstition to say someone's name after they disappear, as if to speak it aloud would bring the same fate to your doorstep. So Tath becomes the last one, and no one visits his hut anymore. One afternoon, Mare says, I saw someone watching us last night. You stiffen, ask if it was one of the guards. She shakes her head, too tall, and it did not move. Where, you ask, by the tree, she says, and you know which tree she means, the one at the edge of the woods, the one no snow ever rests on. You grip her hand, and she does not flinch. Did it see you, you ask? She nods slowly, but I do not think it has eyes. Not the kind we would know. You want to believe this is fever talk, imagination, but the way she says it is too steady, too calm, and you start to wonder if your silence has become complicity. If the stories you used to tell her have made a door you cannot close. That night, the fire does not go out, and you do not feed it. You decide it is time to barter, not just because you need more than snow, water, and frozen roots, but because something about Mare's eyes makes you feel like the world is unraveling one heartbeat at a time. You tell her you will go alone, that she should rest. She does not argue, just nods and pulls the blanket tighter. You step out into a morning full of wind and smoke. The village smells less like life now and more like survival. Bitter and burned, you head toward the tanner's shed. Brad, who deals in skins and secrets, has always been unpredictable, but he is the only one still willing to trade outside official channels. When you arrive, the door is ajar, the air inside thick with lye, wet leather, and something sourer. Brad is hunched over a basin, scrubbing with such force his knuckles bleed. He looks up when you enter, squints, and says, "I know what you want." You pause, not sure how he could. But before you can speak, he adds, "You need warmth, and warmth has a price." You nod slowly. Pull from your pouch a little packet of dried fennel and a strip of cured turnip you had hidden for weeks. It is not much, but it is all you have. He waves it off. "That is not the price, I mean." He lifts a cloth from the table beside him, revealing a small bundle wrapped in gut string and twine. Inside is bone, carved smooth, pale, polished, shaped like a finger but longer, too long. He sets it gently on the table. "This," he says, "is from something that does not rot, something that listens when it is buried." You stare at it, unable to speak. "You give me something living, and this will keep your fire fed for 7 nights without wood." His eyes glint, but not with greed, more like reverence, as if he is offering holy relics. You feel your throat tighten. "I have nothing living," you say, and he just nods, "Not yet." You leave without the bone, but not without the weight of his words. When you return to the hut, Mare is at the window again. She turns and asks, "What did you see?" Not "What did you get?" but "What did you see?" And that difference feels enormous. You tell her the truth, as much of it as you understand, and she listens without blinking, then whispers, "He is making things again." You ask who, but she does not answer. Later that night, you dream of Brad's shed, but in the dream, it stretches impossibly deep, racks of skins like curtains of meat swaying in a breeze that does not exist. And at the far end, a shape is seated, carving bones with its own teeth. You wake with your mouth full of ash, spit it out, and find soot on your tongue. The fire burns clean, too clean, almost blue. The next morning, you head toward the chapel again, hoping to speak to the priest, but he is not there. Instead, Lyra stands at the altar, lighting candles with her sleeve held high to shield the flame. She looks older somehow, not just tired, but stretched. You approach and she nods before you speak. "He is gone," she says, "said he had to make peace with the forest." You ask if she believes him, and she shakes her head. "I think he has gone to offer names." The phrase chills you. "Names for what?" You ask. "For forgetting." She answers, "If you give them names, they remember you longer." You sit beside her in the pew, stare at the flickering light. She adds, "I do not think remembering is kindness anymore." That evening, the sky turns red, not with sunset, but with smoke. Someone's hut has caught fire, or been set. You do not ask whose. You just help pass buckets of snow while the children watch in silence. No one cries, not even the owner, who stands with arms crossed, staring at the blaze like it owes him something. After, Mare tells you she saw someone walk into the flames and not come out. But no one else confirms it, and you start to wonder whether she sees differently now or simply more. Days pass, or something like days. Time loses form when hunger becomes routine. You barter small things. Worn buttons, half spoons. A lock of your mother's hair still braided and hidden in a cloth pouch. Each trade empties you a little, not of goods, but of meaning. Until one morning you find a bundle left outside your door, wrapped in birch bark and tied with a string made from human hair. Inside is a flat stone, etched with the same ash symbol you wiped away last week. But now it glows faintly, not with light, but with cold. You toss it into the snow. But it does not melt. Mare says, "Do not break it." And you do not ask how she knows. That night, your dreams grow stranger. You walk through the woods, but each tree is hollow and filled with whispering mouths, lips where knots should be, teeth where the bark splits, and each one calls a different name. Names you almost remember, names from your village, names not yet gone. You wake drenched in sweat. And the fire is dead, fully dead, but the room is warm, and Mare is humming. The next morning, Brad is gone, the tanner's shed empty, its contents burned, no tracks in the snow. No one claims to have seen anything, but you notice the sled by the well, covered in sackcloth, and no one dares lift it. The sun does not rise so much as it fades into a lighter shade of gray, the kind of sky that offers no warmth, no promise, only the faintest clue that the world is still turning somewhere far. Beyond this hunger, Mare wakes before you and tells you it is the day of the whispering rite. You do not know what that means, but she says it with the calm certainty of someone remembering rather than inventing. You ask where she heard it, and she shrugs. "Ellsworth told me in the last snow." You have not seen Ellsworth in 2 days. Not since she left her bundle of herbs beside the well and walked toward the edge of the woods. No one followed, no one asked. The village has grown quieter not just in sound but in weight. Like a room holding its breath, you ask Mare what the rite involves. And she looks at the fire. Now barely a few coals. It is not for fire, she says. It is for remembering who we were before we forget what we need to be. The words do not make sense, but they feel true. And so you rise, wrap her in the cloak, and lead her to the edge of the square, where others are already gathering, not in crowds, not in conversation, but in clusters of 2s and 3s, standing around small bundles laid on the ground, dried twigs, pieces of cloth, stones marked with ash. Someone hums low and slow, and the sound spreads, not a song exactly, more like a shared rhythm of loss. You see Lyra across the way, holding a bowl of melted snow mixed with beetroot. She dips her fingers and draws a circle on her own forehead, then another on the forehead of the boy beside her, then walks away without explanation. You feel a hand at your elbow and turn to see the blacksmith, eyes red, sleeves rolled, holding out a small pouch. Your father owed me this, he says, voice brittle, and debt dies last. Inside is a coin, silver, real, too bright for this world. You start to refuse, but he closes your hand around it and walks away before you can speak. Mare stares at the coin and says, we will need that tonight. You do not ask why. Because lately she only speaks when it matters. And silence is its own kind of warning. That evening, as the last gray light slips behind the trees, you see movement at the chapel. The priest is back, thinner than before. Eyes sunken, but walking upright. He carries no candle, no censer, only a book, but not his usual ledger or scripture. This one is older, cracked leather, red thread binding the pages. He lays it on the steps and opens it without ceremony. A few villagers approach, drawn not by command but curiosity. He reads in a voice that wavers, not from fear but from effort. The words are not Latin, not English. Not anything you recognize, but they feel heavy, like wet cloth on your chest. When he finishes, he closes the book, nods once, and says, we have asked, now we wait to be heard. Then he returns to the chapel and bolts the door. You do not see him again that night. Mare whispers that the book was wrong. It is supposed to be spoken by 3, not 1, and you wonder if she means voices or people later, after darkness thickens like oil. You and Mare sit by the hearth, what is left of it, the warmth thin but present, and she asks you to tell a story, not one of kings or stars or brides made of smoke, but a true one about your mother. You hesitate because truth feels sharp now, like ice under skin, but you tell her anyway. About the time your mother stitched a hole in your boot using thread pulled from her own sleeve, about how she made broth from stones when there was nothing else, how she laughed with her whole body even when crying would have made more sense. Mare listens, eyes closed, mouth curled in something close to peace. And you feel the fire burn a little brighter, just for a moment before flickering down again. The wind outside picks up, but it is not howling, it is whispering. You press your ear to the shutter and hear it clearly. Voices, not words, but voices, too many to count, too soft to ignore. Mare hears them too, but she does not move. She just says they are asking for their names back. You do not respond, because your own name suddenly feels far away, like something you left behind in the root cellar weeks ago and forgot to retrieve, just before sleep takes you. A thump sounds at the door, not loud, but distinct. You rise slowly, grasp the stick you keep nearby, the one carved with notches of each day survived. You open the door a crack and see nothing, but on the snow, a circle has been drawn. Perfectly round, with 7 small stones inside, each marked with a different symbol. None familiar, but one glows faintly, and you recognize its shape from the coin the blacksmith gave you. Mare joins you, takes the coin from her pocket, and places it gently in the center of the circle, then looks up at you and says, now we listen, and so you do. By morning the stones are gone. No coin, no circle, no markings in the snow, just your footprints leading back to the hut and Mare's faint ones beside them. The world feels different in a way you can't name, not lighter, not heavier, just more aware, like the ground is listening now, or the trees have started remembering. Mare does not mention the circle or the coin. She simply boils water with 2 strips of old bark and calls it tea. You drink it without complaint because it is warm, and warmth is a luxury that now arrives without reason. Later that day, while gathering dry moss near the edge of the woods, you hear the bell, not the village bell, not the chapel's cracked bronze tongue, but the old handbell used only for travelers. You turn and see him, a friar robed in gray, dusted with snow, walking slowly but purposefully toward the village with a satchel over one shoulder and a small wooden cross hanging crooked around. His neck, his boots are mismatched, and his beard is matted, but he smiles as if he has seen spring on the other side of the mountain and brought word back. Villagers gather hesitantly. Watching from doorways and corners, the friar raises a hand in greeting and says, "Peace upon this place, and fire upon its fear." No one knows what to make of it. The steward arrives, scowling from his saddle, but says nothing. The friar walks straight to the chapel, knocks 3 times, and the priest opens the door, stunned. They embrace like old brothers, or at least men who have survived the same storm. The friar speaks that night at the chapel, and you go not because you are drawn to the faith, but because Mare says he carries something old, and you trust her sense more than your own eyes now. The chapel is full, bodies pressed together for shared heat and curiosity. The friar stands before the altar, hands raised not in blessing but in invitation. "I bring news," he says, "and relics, from the north, from abbeys sealed by snow and silence, from monasteries buried in frost. I have walked with ghosts and eaten with wolves," he says, and they both ask the same thing, "Who remembers us?" He unwraps a bundle of cloth and reveals 3 objects: a candle black as pitch, a vial of clear liquid that catches no reflection, and a wooden disc carved with a tree whose roots spiral inward. These, he says, are not for prayer, but for balance. The priest watches warily, but says nothing. The friar continues, "There is hunger, yes, and cold, but there is also memory, and memory is hungriest of all." Someone in the crowd asks what the disc does, and the friar smiles. "It reminds the land of what it once promised. You do not understand." But Mare leans in and whispers he knows about the tree. The crowd disperses slowly, uncertain whether to feel hope or dread. Outside, the wind picks up again, carrying with it a strange scent. Not smoke, not rot, something like damp stone. The friar begins visiting huts, not asking for food, but offering stories, old ones, older than the village, tales of stones that hum when buried, under moonlight, of rivers that remember every name whispered at their banks, of trees that bloom only when someone is forgotten. Mare listens to each one and never asks questions, only nods when they end. One morning, he brings you a bundle wrapped in stitched bark. Inside is a page, torn from a book, written in a language that hurts to read. The letters twist slightly even when you look away. Mare touches it once, gently, and says, "This tells how to end the winter." You ask how she can read it, and she replies, "It is not reading, it is remembering." You hide the page beneath a loose board in the floor. Though you are not sure why, something about it feels alive, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat through vellum. That night, the friar joins you by the hearth, hands cupped over the small fire. He asks about your family, about your father, and you tell him the story as you know it, how your father vanished during the last famine, how some say he stole grain, others say he offered himself to spare you. The friar listens and then says, "Some sacrifices are seeds, not graves." You do not know what that means, but it lingers in your chest long after he leaves. Mare asks what you think he wants, and you say you are not sure he wants anything. Maybe he is just a messenger, maybe he is a test. She frowns. Messages do not hum, and you realize she is right. Ever since he arrived, the wind has been full of that soft, low tone. Almost like singing, almost like warning. The next day, the steward forbids anyone from entering the woods, claims there has been a wolf sighting, but no tracks are shown. And the only sound at night is not howling, but bells. Faint, distant, like a procession moving slowly through the trees. The friar says nothing about the order, but you catch him standing at the edge of the forest that evening, whispering something into the trees with the disc in his hand. And when he turns back, his eyes are darker, not tired, but deeper, like something else has looked through them. Mare says he is not walking alone anymore, and you do not ask what she means. The solstice arrives without ceremony, no sun to measure, no bells to mark it, only a deepening stillness that presses down like damp wool. Yet somehow everyone knows it has come. The shortest day, the longest night, the place where the old year curls into itself and either dies or remembers to wake up again. In the past, this day would have meant a feast. A fire, music rising through chimney smoke, You remember a solstice from your childhood when your father carved a horn from birch and played, until your mother wept laughing. But that was before the long hunger began. Now the solstice means survival and superstition. By midday, the villagers gather in the square with bundles of dried reeds, scraps of cloth, and whatever herbs they have not yet boiled into bitter broth. The priest is absent, still locked within the chapel, but the friar takes his place. Standing atop the well, holding the black candle aloft like a staff. He calls it the old light, the hunger wick, says it must burn through the night to remind the land we are still alive. Then he asks for names, not of people, but of things lost. One by one the villagers offer them, the name of a barn that burned, the name of a field that never bloomed, the name of a child born and buried within the same breath. Mare leans against your side and whispers, "Do not speak your own name," and you understand without asking why. The friar places the candle in a small stone basin at the center of the square and lights it with a stick drawn from a hearth no one admits to owning. The flame is blue, impossibly so, and burns without flickering even in the wind. People gather around. Not too close, singing begins again, wordless, more hum than hymn, a rhythm from before language. You feel it in your chest, in your ribs, like something crawling out of sleep. As the night deepens, villagers return to their homes one by one. But the candle remains, untended, and unbothered by the cold. Mare asks if she can stay to watch it. You hesitate, but something in her face convinces you. So you sit together, wrapped in your cloak, watching the flames stretch tall and thin like a blade of frozen river light. Sometime after midnight, a figure approaches, not from the village, but from the woods, tall, robed in something tattered and wet, head bowed. You reach for your stick, but Mare touches your arm. "It is just memory," she says, "let it pass." And so you do. The figure moves toward the candle, stops a few feet away, and kneels, not praying, just resting. And as it sits, you notice others arriving too, not all at once, but quietly, like smoke. One crouches beside a barrel, another leans against the trough, all watching the candle, all motionless, their faces indistinct, not masked, not hidden, simply forgotten, as if the snow itself has smoothed away their features. You feel no fear, only awe. They are not ghosts, not demons. They are something older, something parallel. Mare whispers. They come every solstice to see who still believes we matter. And you do not ask who told her, because now you are starting to remember too. An old tale about the watchers of the last fire, spirits of the hungry years, drawn to places where hope is thinnest. They do not take, they witness, they listen, they wait. Dawn does not come quickly, but the candle burns until the sky begins to pale from black to bruised gray. And as the first light curls over the treetops, the watchers rise one by one and return to the woods, vanishing without sound, without trace. Mare stands, brushes snow from her dress, and says, "They were counting us." And you nod, not because you understand, but because it feels true. The candle burns down to nothing, no smoke, no wick, only a circle of melted snow where the basin stood. Later that day, the priest reappears in the chapel doorway, face drawn, hands blistered, and speaks a single sentence to the villagers who've gathered in uneasy silence. The rites were accepted. Then he closes the door again, and no one follows. For the next 2 days, the wind changes direction, warmer air drifts in from the east. And a few birds are spotted, distant, high above, like they are reconsidering a return. But no one celebrates, not yet, because everyone remembers the watchers and wonders how many more solstices they will be willing to count. The snow returns 2 days after the solstice, soft at first, then insistent, thick enough to smother paths and erase boundaries between huts, between intentions, between what is owed and what can be stolen. Mare says nothing as you stuff rags under the door and seal the shutters with the last strips of hide. Outside the world is being erased one flake at a time, and the village shrinks inward, not just physically, but morally. The silence deepens in that strange way hunger makes possible, where sound becomes suspicious. A cough means illness. A creaking floorboard means movement you did not permit. You wake in the night and count your breath like coins, measuring what you can afford to lose. And that is when it begins, the plan, not spoken aloud, not shared, but understood. You are going to steal from the granary. It is the most unforgivable act, not because of the risk, but because it means you have stopped believing in fairness, in patience, in justice served by stewards or saints. The manor holds the grain, locked behind iron bars and faithless keys, guarded by two men who only pretend to believe the Lord is still watching. The priest does not bless the stores anymore. He has not been near them since the first snowfall. As if the grain inside carries a shame even holy water won't wash clean, Mare does not ask what you are planning. She simply hands you the stick with the sharp end and says, "Be quick." You move through the village at dusk, hood pulled low, the storm muffling your steps. The granary sits just beyond the stable, stone-walled, wooden door reinforced with iron hinges. But you know there is a loose slat at the rear where deliveries used to be passed in haste during autumn's rush. You found it months ago, said nothing, waited, saved it like a prayer not yet prayed. When you reach the building, the wind howls louder, as if trying to warn or accuse. You ignore it, slide around the side, find the slat, fingers numb as you work it loose. Inside is darkness and the thick scent of grain, sour and sweet, like old promises. You slip through, land quietly, and listen. No footsteps, no voices. Only the rustle of rats startled by your arrival. You move to the sacks, fill your pouch with what you can, rough barley, split oats, a handful of what might be lentils. Your heart is beating in your throat, each breath loud enough to echo, and then you hear it. Not a guard, not footsteps, but breathing, slow, deep. Behind you, you freeze. Clutching the pouch, you turn slowly and see a shape, not fully formed, darker than the dark, hunched low near the corner. Its face hidden but its presence unmistakable. It does not move, does not speak, only breathes, in and out, in and out. And you suddenly feel smaller than you have ever felt. You back away, mouth dry, and as you reach the slat, the shape shifts, not toward you, but deeper into the shadows. As if retreating into the grain itself, you do not stop to wonder. You flee, slamming the slat back into place, running with numb legs through snow that burns your skin. When you reach the hut, Mare is waiting. She says nothing, only lights the fire higher than usual. You empty the pouch, hands shaking, and she begins sorting the grain, discarding bits of rot and husk. You sit in silence until your pulse slows. Then whisper, "Someone was there." She nods, "Someone always is." That night, you dream of fields, golden and full, but the stalks grow backward, pulled into the soil by unseen hands, and when you try to run, your feet sink into grain like mud. And the sky above you is full of watching eyes, not angry, not kind, just watching. The next morning, you hear that one of the guards at the granary did not return to the manor. His partner says he vanished during the snow, must have slipped, maybe wandered into the woods. No one searches, no one speaks his name. But that night, a bundle appears at the chapel steps, wrapped in sackcloth. Inside is a boot, frozen solid and stuffed with barley. Someone leaves it there until morning, then burns it without comment. Mare says the shape you saw was hungry too, and you do not argue, because your belly is full, and guilt has started to taste like something you can swallow. By the following day, the whispers have caught up to you. They arrive not in shouts or accusations but in glances. The kind people give fire when it is low and dangerous. As if they have sensed something burning where it should not be, Mare notices first. She tugs your sleeve as you pass the well and says softly, "They are trying not to see you." Which is worse than being seen. You return to the hut and bar the door before sunset. No knocks, no visitors, just the quiet weight of suspicion pressing in from the world outside. But it does not last. The next morning there is a pounding at the door. Not the wind at all. You open it to find two of the steward's men flanking a third. A villager you recognize, Joran, a boy really lanky and red-cheeked, his nose already bleeding from the cold. He points at you with one trembling hand and says, "They stole from the granary." You barely hear the rest. The words blur behind the thrum of blood in your ears. The guards bind your hands with rope rougher than anything you have worn. They march you through the village as neighbors peek from behind shutters and broken curtains. None speak. Some look away. Some do not. The square is already filling. Punishment is public. The steward waits, wrapped in his thick fur, looking more annoyed than angry. Beside him, the friar stands silent, not interfering, not leaving, just watching. The steward reads a list of charges: theft of crown grain, endangerment of ration flow, refusal to submit to village code. You expect Mare to cry out, but she stands still behind the line, eyes locked on yours, calm, as if she knew this moment was coming, and has already seen how it ends. The punishment is 10 lashes, no more, no less, meant to shame, not kill, but shame is its own kind of execution. They tie your hands to the whipping post, a relic from older justice. And the crowd grows quiet. The first strike burns more than it cuts. The second digs deeper. You stop counting after 4, your body folding inward as if trying to remember how it felt to be whole. Someone sobs nearby, but it is not Mare. When it ends, they cut you loose and let you fall into the snow, your face pressed to frost, breath shallow, pain dull and thick. No one helps you up. That is part of the punishment too. The friar finally steps forward, kneels beside you, and presses something into your palm, a small piece of bark with a single line etched into it. Not a symbol you recognize, but your hand closes around it instinctively. Later, much later, Mare finds you crawling back toward the hut. She helps you inside, says nothing, only covers you with what is left of the blankets and begins boiling water. Not for stew, there is nothing to cook, but for heat, for dignity. She tells you softly, they won't come again, not after tonight. You ask why, and she answers, because they saw you bleed and did not feed on it. You do not understand. Not fully, but you hold the bark tightly and dream of a river that speaks in pulses. The next day, Joran is gone. No one says where, no one asks, but his mother is seen scrubbing the snow outside her hut long after nightfall, as if trying to erase a footprint too large for one boy. The guards seem different too, more alert, as if expecting someone to repay justice with justice. But you do not, because something has shifted. Not in them, in you. Your back burns, but your hands are steady. And that night, when Mare draws the curtains tight and lights the last sliver of candle wax, you speak aloud for the first time in days. You say your own name, slowly, deliberately, and the fire crackles in reply, not loudly, not angrily, just enough to remind you that something heard, and that something remembered. You wait 3 days before deciding to go, not because your body has fully recovered, but because the dreams have not stopped, and the last one showed you her face. The herb woman, the one Mare speaks of in riddles, the one who lives where the trees shift just slightly when no wind moves. You wrap your back in cloth, tighten your boots with cord, and set out just before dusk. Mare hands you a small pouch with nothing in it but 3 dry stones and says, give her what she asks. Not what you think she wants. You do not ask what that means. You simply nod. The forest is quieter than usual, the snow deeper, but you walk without hesitation, as if something beneath the crusted white remembers your shape. The old stories say she lives beyond the creek that never freezes, and it takes you longer than expected to reach it. Not because of distance, but because the paths feel wrong, like they have forgotten where they go. When you find the creek, it does run, black water cutting through snow like ink across parchment. And there beside it, a crooked hut built into the side of a hill, roof thatched with moss instead of straw. No smoke from the chimney, but a faint scent of thyme and earth hangs in the air. You knock, though no one told you to, and the door creaks open on its own inside. The space is warm, too warm, as if summer has been kept in a jar and cracked open just for your visit. She stands at the far end of the room, back turned, stirring something in a bowl made of carved bone. When she turns, her eyes are not old, but they have lived longer than time. Her hands are stained with sap, and her breath smells of roots. You have brought no gift. She says, not accusing, just noting. You hold out the pouch with the stones. She takes them, weighs them in her palm, then drops them into a jar filled with dried beetles. They will remember what they are when it is time. She says, then gestures for you to sit. She does not ask why you have come. She does not need to. Instead, she picks up a bowl of something steaming, sets it before you, and says, eat, or the pain won't mean anything. You eat, slowly. Whatever it is tastes of bark and ash and a sweetness that does not belong. When the bowl is empty, she takes it, places it back on the shelf, and says, what burns beneath your ribs will need more than healing. It will need binding. She pulls out a cloth, unwraps it, and reveals a root shaped like a bent finger, gnarled and pale. This only grows under snow, and only blooms where something has died unseen. She hands it to you, tells you to boil it in silence. Then bury the pot where no one will walk for 7 days. If you speak before it is done, it forgets what it is curing. Then she adds. If you bury it wrong, it remembers you instead. You take it, thank her, but she stops you at the door and says, "You will owe me," and you ask what. She smiles, a word you have not used yet. The walk back is slower. The woods seem to lean closer now. Not hostile, just curious. You reach the village just as the snow begins again. Mare is waiting. She helps you inside. You say nothing and begin boiling water without speaking. The root simmers gently, releasing no scent, but Mare closes her eyes as if hearing a lullaby. When it is done, you carry the pot to the edge of the village, past the chapel, past the well, to a patch of ground where no one walks, and you dig with your hands until the earth gives way. Bury the pot, cover it, and sit in silence for as long as your fingers can feel. The next 7 days pass like mist. You say nothing, not even to Mare, not even to the fire, and in that silence something softens. The ache in your back eases. The dreams shift from fever to shadow. On the 7th night, you return to the burial spot, dig up the pot, and inside is nothing, no root, no water, just a small feather, white and curled. You bring it back, show Mare. She says it means you remembered, and you do not ask what. Because some part of you knows. The next morning, someone leaves a bundle at your door. Inside is a strip of salted meat and a dried pear. No note, no sign, just the gift. Mare says the debt has shifted, and you believe her because the wind no longer rattles the shutters with malice. It only hums. It begins with a cry, sharp and sudden in the dark. Not quite human, not quite animal. Enough to send a chill down your spine, sharper than any wind. Mare sits up instantly. Eyes wide, her mouth already forming the words you hoped she would not say. Someone's gone. You know without asking who it might be. The village is too small now for the possibilities to be many. You wrap yourself in the cloak, grab the stick, and step out into the early dusk. The snow is falling again. Slower this time, softer, as if pretending to be gentle while hiding something beneath it. You make your way toward the sound, already fading, and find Tomas standing at the edge of the woods, holding a lantern in one hand and a small mitten in the other. His face is pale, not from cold, but from something older, heavier. He does not speak, just points to a trail of small footprints veering off the path into the trees. You recognize the pattern immediately, not from shoes but from memory. It is Elin, the miller's youngest, a child of only 5 winters, always wandering, always humming, until today. Tomas mutters, "She was here just a moment ago," then stares at the snow like it betrayed him. Others gather quickly. A search begins, but it is clear from the start that the snow is working against you. Swallowing prints, confusing direction, you find yourself following Mare without question. Her steps precise, her gaze sharp, as if she has been through this before. Deeper into the woods, past the tree line where the pines grow strange and the light fades quicker than it should. Someone calls Elin's name, then again, then silence. The group begins to splinter, frustration mixing with fear, and soon it is just you, Mare and Lyra, moving carefully toward a hollow you have never noticed before. Inside it, the snow is thin, revealing a patch of earth where no child should be. Mare kneels, brushes away leaves, and reveals a small bundle of twigs wrapped in cloth, tied with red thread. Lyra gasps. That is one of the old ways. You ask what it means. Mare answers, it is a trade, something taken, something left, and your stomach turns. Because you know what was taken, and the twigs are too dry to be fresh, too carefully arranged to be panicked. Someone did this with intent. Behind you, branches crack. And you whirl around. The shape that steps forward is not one of the searchers, not anyone from the village. It is tall, covered in a cloak of bark and snow, its face obscured by a mask carved to resemble a deer's skull, and it carries in its arms something wrapped in linen. It lays the bundle gently on the ground and then steps back into the trees without a word. Mare moves first, unwraps the linen, and inside is Elin, sleeping, breathing. Untouched, but holding in her hand a stone marked with a circle and a line through it. The same symbol you wiped from your door once. Lyra says nothing, only crosses herself with both hands. Mare lifts Elin gently and you all walk back to the village without speaking. When you arrive, no one believes what you say, not exactly, but they do not argue either because the child is safe and the price seems, for now, unpaid. The next morning, the chapel door is open, and on the steps is a new bundle, not a gift, not an offering, just a message. a small circle of feathers around a jar filled with snowmelt. Floating in the jar is a single seed, dark and round, too perfect to be from any crop grown in your soil. Mare touches it once and says they have returned balance. For now, you ask if she means the watchers, the trees, the forest itself, but she shakes her head, all of it. That night, as Elin sleeps curled beside the hearth, you stay awake watching the fire, not because you fear it will go out, but because you fear what it might reveal if it burns too brightly. Outside, snow falls again, soft as breath, but in the pattern it makes on the window, you see the shape of a hand, open, waiting, not reaching in, just reminding you it is still there. The snow does not let up, but the cold sharpens, not in temperature, but in intention. It feels now less like a season and more like a sentence, like a judgment being carried out one frostbitten breath at a time. Food has become myth. Even the steward no longer pretends to enforce rationing. Because there is nothing left to ration, the granary has been locked permanently. Not to protect what is inside, but to hide the fact that it too is nearly bare. And so comes the Lord's tithe, summoned by hornblast and writ, the parchment nailed to the chapel door before dawn, demanding each household render an offering, not just in goods, but in presence. You are to present yourself with your best and final provision. Failure to do so will be taken as defiance, as treason, and you know what happens to traitors. The village is tense, too quiet, not from obedience, but from calculation. Every family is weighing what they can surrender without dying, or if dying is perhaps easier than obedience. Mare is quiet the whole morning, then simply says, "We will give them the name." You look at her, stunned, but she continues, "Not yours, not mine, just a name, one we do not use anymore." You want to argue, but something in her voice is older than either of you. And so you agree. You write a name on a scrap of wood, wrap it in a bit of cloth, and tuck it into the bundle with your last dried root. It feels wrong and right all at once. The tithe is to be given in the square at dusk, under the watch of the steward and his men. The friar is there too, standing at the edge like a shadow that never blinks. Each family steps forward in turn, placing their bundles in a large wooden crate flanked by guards. Rurik brings a rusted horseshoe. Lyra brings the last bit of her mother's lye soap. Tomas lays down 3 icicles wrapped in twine. No one speaks until it is your turn. You approach with Mare beside you, the bundle cradled in your hands like a child you never had. You place it in the crate. The steward narrows his eyes and asks, "What is it?" And Mare answers, "Something no one wanted to remember." The steward scoffs, gestures for the next in line, and the ritual continues. When it ends, the crate is loaded onto a sled and taken up toward the manor, flanked by torchlight, and for the first time in weeks. The fire in the square is allowed to burn, small, crackling, but shared. The villagers gather around it, not for warmth, but for proximity. No one speaks, but no one leaves either, as if the fire's presence is enough to tether them to each other. That night, the wind does not howl, it hums low and steady, and Mare says, "I think it accepted the name." You ask what happens now, and she replies, "Now we see what it gives back." The next morning, the ground has shifted, subtly, as if something beneath it has moved in the night. The snow lies strangely, gathered in circles around each hut, leaving bare earth at the center, as if the land has blinked, or breathed. At the edge of the village, a figure stands watching, not cloaked, not masked, simply still. You recognize it not as a person, but as the shape from the granary. From the old dreams, from the space between stories, it watches until it is sure you have seen it, then turns and walks away, and when you look down, a new mark has been drawn in the snow. Not by hand, but by presence, a spiral inside a square. The symbol of return. Mare says, "It means the hunger has counted us, and for now it is done." You do not know if that means mercy or something else, but the air feels different. Like the first crack in a long-held silence. That evening, you boil the last of the melted snow, not because you must, but because it feels like gratitude, and as you drink it, Mare hums again, not the eerie tune from before, but something new, something almost like a song, and when she finishes, she whispers, "I think I remember spring." You wake in darkness again, but this time it is not the cold that stirs you. It is a voice, low and familiar, speaking just outside the hut, not threatening, not loud, but steady, the kind of voice used for confession. You rise slowly, glance at Mare, who is still asleep, her breath even, her brow smooth. You move to the shutter. Lift it just a crack and see two figures near the edge of the square. The moonlight is faint, but you recognize the speaker immediately. Tomas, standing with his head bowed, his hands shaking. The person he is speaking to is harder to make out, their cloak heavy. Shoulders hunched, but something in the shape triggers a strange memory. Tomas says, "I did not know. I swear it, I only told the steward what I saw. I did not know it would come back." The other figure says nothing, simply stands, listening, then turns and walks away into the snow without a word. Tomas stumbles back toward his hut, clutching his chest, not in pain, but in fear. You close the shutter, heart racing, and sit for a long time by the fire, thinking of the weight of secrets and the price of memory. The next morning, Mare asks if you believe in redemption. The question feels too big for breakfast, but you answer anyway, not for free. She nods slowly and stirs the pot of hot water as if it were soup. "I think someone's about to test that." She adds, "That afternoon, while collecting moss near the well, you find a scrap of parchment stuck between the stones. It is weather-worn, half frozen, but you recognize the script, your father's, sharp and looping, the kind he used when writing down measurements for rope or seed. It reads, he knew what would happen. But he stayed anyway. Your breath catches. The words burn hotter than truth. You take it home, show Mare, and she traces the letters gently with one finger before saying, "I think it is time we talk to Rurik." You hesitate. The carpenter has been silent since your punishment, watching you with eyes like unfinished wood. But you nod, and together you walk to his hut. He opens the door before you knock, as if expecting you. The inside smells of resin and memory. He gestures to a bench and sits across from you, silent at first, then finally says, "Your father made choices none of us were brave enough to make." He opens a drawer and pulls out a small bundle, wrapped in cloth. Inside is a length of carved wood, smooth and etched with the same symbols from the forest. He was one of them, not the watchers, but the rememberers. Those who offered names to the land when no one else would. You ask why he never told you. And Rurik replies, "Because you were still his son, not his legacy." Mare asks, "Did he trade himself?" Rurik nods, "But not for food, not for warmth, for time." The word hangs in the air like incense. Rurik continues, "He gave his name so you would have enough days to reach this one. You leave with the wood in your hands, its weight strange and familiar, and that night you place it on the hearth, just beside the flame, and whisper your father's name, not to call him back, but to let him rest." The next morning, something is different in the village. The air feels less brittle, the snow softer. As if the season has started to exhale, children play near the square again, not loudly, but with purpose. Mare sits at the window watching them and says, "I think it is working." You do not ask what she means because you feel it too, as if something has loosened, some ancient knot unraveling thread by thread. But then Lyra arrives, face pale, breath visible in the doorway. She holds a bundle in her arms, trembling. Inside is a small set of bones, bird-like, wrapped in linen. She says she found them beneath the chapel floor, placed carefully, not buried, just hidden. Mare steps forward and takes the bundle gently. "This is the debt," she says. "Not ours, but old." That night, you return to the woods, alone, with the bones in hand and your father's name in your mouth. You bury them beneath the crooked tree. Not the watcher's tree, but the other, the one that never bloomed. And as you press the soil closed, you feel warmth rise through your hands, not from fire, but from the ground itself. A memory returned, not yours, but given. The first sign is the cracking sound, not sharp like ice, but deep, like bone or bark splitting under weight it was never meant to bear. It comes at dawn, just as the frost begins to lift from the edges of the thatched roofs, and it echoes through the village like a warning whispered too late. Mare hears it too. Her head tilts and her breath catches. She rises slowly, pulls on her boots without speaking, and nods for you to follow. You do not ask where, because you already know. You move together past the chapel, past the well, past the remains of the old tithe sled now buried beneath a drift, and into the woods toward the tree, not the bent one or the hollow one, but the cursed tree, the one no one ever named, because to name it would be to notice it, and to notice it would be to invite its gaze. It stands in a clearing now, fully revealed by snow that melted only in its shadow, the roots gnarled like claws gripping the earth, and there, at the base of the trunk, a wide split yawns open, fresh and glistening, not with sap, but with something darker, thicker, red-black and pulsing slowly like breath. Mare kneels beside it, presses her hand to the bark, and closes her eyes. You do not move, not because you are afraid, but because the moment demands stillness. After a long pause, she whispers, "It is waking," and you feel a cold that is not wind curl around your spine. When she stands, her palm is stained, and she does not wipe it off. Only says, "It remembers your family." You start to ask what she means, but she shakes her head. "Not just your father, the whole line, back to when names were bartered like bread." The cursed tree, as the villagers call it, was once a boundary marker, a place where treaties were sealed with blood, where exiles left their names before vanishing into the woods. Some say it was sacred. Others say it was cursed the moment it bore witness to a broken vow. Either way, it has never split like this, never bled. By the time you return to the village, the news has spread. Thomas speaks first, voice shaking. It is because of him. Pointing at you, his bloodline brought this. Others murmur. Some nod, others hesitate. The friar arrives late, his cloak damp with frost, and he says nothing at first, just walks to the center of the square and lights a small flame in his hand. Not magic, just flint and oil, but symbolic. Then he speaks. A tree does not bleed for the wicked. It bleeds for the wounded. The priest, who has not been seen for days, emerges from the chapel and counters. Or it bleeds to remind us we have strayed too far from the old paths. Tension rises. Lines form not in sand, but in silence. Mare steps forward and says clearly, "The tree is not a punishment. It is a mirror." And suddenly the crowd grows quiet. That night, you sit by the fire, the carved wood from your father still resting near the hearth, and the blood on Mare's palm has not faded. She watches the flame and says, "You have to go back there." And you nod, because of course you do. At midnight, you return alone, the snow crunching softly underfoot. The tree stands in the clearing as before, but now there is something at its base, a shape human-sized, slumped forward. As you approach, you realize it is the priest, his hands folded, lips parted as if in prayer, eyes closed, and blood staining his robes from the waist down. The wound is not violent, just final, like an offering laid carefully in place. In his lap rests a scroll, unrolled, marked with names. You recognize some, others are older, names of ancestors long buried, names from the records your father once kept. At the bottom, one final line, written in a shaking hand, "I remember, so you may rest." You take the scroll and leave the body where it is, not from fear but respect. The next day, Mare burns the scroll without hesitation, ashes falling into the snow like gray leaves. You ask why, and she says, "Because remembering can be heavier than forgetting." And as the last ash disappears, the air feels thinner, easier to breathe. That night, the tree stands silent, closed once more. No blood, no crack, just bark and silence. And for the first time, the wind shifts without speaking. The thaw begins not with sunlight, but with sound. A slow, steady drip somewhere beyond the hut, too soft to mark, too persistent to ignore. You open the shutter and see it. Meltwater trailing down the edge of the roof, carving a tiny path through the grime of winter. The snow has begun to sink, not vanish, but settle, heavy and wet like a blanket that has finally accepted its own weight. Mare stands beside you, her breath fogging the glass, and says, "The ground is waking up." But the way she says it sounds less like celebration and more like warning. You step outside and your boots crack through the top crust of the snow. Water seeps in immediately, but you do not care. You walk to the edge of the well and lean over. The water level has risen. Not much, but enough to notice. Thomas arrives moments later, carrying a bundle of cloth. Inside are carrots, real ones, shriveled and half soft, but orange. His eyes wide with the wonder of it. They were under the collapsed shed. He says, "I thought they were gone." But they kept. Somehow, others begin to appear with similar stories. Turnips sprouting from forgotten corners of the root cellar. Jars of pickled eggs long thought spoiled but now edible. A cured strip of venison buried beneath firewood as if placed there by grace itself. It feels like a miracle, but Mare frowns. It is not a gift, she says. It is a return. You begin to understand when the earth begins to shift, not everywhere, not violently. Just beneath the tree line, a slow heaving of dirt like something stretching after a long sleep. One morning, a boy named Thurn runs through the village shouting. The field has moved. And when you follow him, you see that a large patch of soil has split open near the edge of the south hill, revealing rows of dark stones arranged in a spiral, not placed there recently, but older than the village, older than names. The friar arrives shortly after. And when he sees the stones, he kneels without speaking, traces the spiral with his finger, and whispers the seedbed. Mare kneels beside him, looks up at you and says, "This is what the famine was waiting for." You ask what she means, and she says, "Some ground must starve before it remembers how to grow." Over the next few days, more signs appear. Moss where no moss has ever grown, birdsong at dusk. Not loud, just tentative, as if the sky is still unsure of its welcome. And then the thing beneath the fields returns, not as a shadow or a figure, but as a rhythm. A pulse felt in the soles of your feet. You wake one night to find Mare outside, barefoot in the mud, her hands outstretched, palms down, whispering. You step toward her, but she shakes her head, and you stop. The earth beneath her is warm, steaming faintly despite the cold air, and something is rising, slowly, carefully, a shape that emerges not from above, but from beneath, stone, carved, ancient, a totem maybe, or a marker, its surface etched with spirals and eyes, symbols that echo the ones you have seen in bark, in fire, in Mare's drawings. When it settles fully above ground, the steam dissipates, and Mare turns to you and says, "This is where the debt was buried." The next morning, the villagers gather around it. Some kneel, some back away, others touch it and weep without knowing why. The friar declares it sacred, but Mare says softly, "No, not sacred, just remembered." And you know what she means. That night, the air smells different, like wet stone and green things trying to be born. And the dreams you have are softer, full of light filtering through leaves you do not yet recognize. The tree remains still, no longer bleeding, but its bark darker, richer, as if something inside has been fed, not sated, but quiet, and the watchers do not return. Not visibly, but their absence is a presence in itself, a silence that means you have been acknowledged, for better or worse. And when you go to the chapel, you find the priest's robes folded neatly on the altar, with a single phrase carved into the wood beneath: "I went to learn what my prayers meant." No one asks if he will return, because some answers do not belong to us, they belong to the land, and the land, for now, has begun to listen again. Spring does not arrive with flowers. It arrives with mud, thick and clinging and full of the things winter left behind: broken tools, scattered bones, forgotten debts. The village wakes slowly as the snow recedes, not with celebration, but with suspicion, as if no one quite believes the hunger has loosened its grip. And maybe it has not. Maybe it has only changed shape. Mare walks with you through the thawing fields, pointing to places where green tries to push through, not fast, not proud, but persistent. At the edge of the woods, the stone marker still stands, slick with meltwater and covered now in moss that smells faintly of salt and something older. You kneel and press your hand against it, half expecting it to hum or breathe, but it only rests solid and cold, as if it has done its part and now asks you to do yours. Back in the square, the villagers begin planting, digging into the mud with fingers too thin and spades too dull. But they do it anyway, because doing is all that remains between despair and momentum. The friar marks the planting rows with bits of bone carved into talismans, and no one questions it. Even Tomas helps, moving slower than he once did, always glancing toward the forest, before turning back to his work. One evening, as Mare stirs a pot of water thickened with root shavings, she asks, "Do you think we will have to pay again?" And you do not answer, not because you do not know, but because you suspect payment never truly ends. It just changes hands. The night before the first planting festival, the wind rises again, but this time it carries a different sound. Laughter, not cruel, not distant, but quiet and near. You step outside and see children dancing in the mud, their feet bare, their eyes bright, and for a moment you forget how long it has been since joy came without fear. Mare watches them too and says they do not remember what was buried, and for once that feels like a blessing. The festival is not what it once was, no music, no feasting. But there is bread, thin and flat, made from the grain you and Mare stole and returned and carried in silence. And the villagers pass it around with reverence rather than hunger, each bite a kind of prayer. The fire burns high that night, the first large fire since before the famine. And around it, people begin to speak again, not just about survival, but about things that matter beyond the stomach, stories, plans, names of the dead said aloud without fear that saying them would summon shadows. Mare tells a story too, about a girl who traded her voice for a bowl that never emptied, but gave it back once she learned to sing in silence. No one questions where she heard it, they only listen. The next day, the earth gives its first true gift, shoots of green breaking through soil near the chapel steps. Not planted, not expected, but present. The friar kneels before them and says, "They have forgiven us," but Mare corrects him. "No, they have remembered us," and somehow that feels more honest. That night, the watchers return. Not in flesh, not in shadow, but in dream they appear in the firelight. Flickering at the edge of vision, standing in the corner of memory, not to threaten, but to bear witness. And when you wake, your hands smell of pine, and the wound on your back itches in a way that feels like closing. Rurik begins carving again. Not tools, but figures, small and round, each with a spiral carved into their chest. He places them along the edge of the field like guardians or reminders. Mare collects seeds, wraps them in cloth marked with names that were never spoken during the famine, and buries them under the roots of the newest trees, the ones that should not have survived. The cursed tree remains still, its bark darker than before, but no longer bleeding, just watching, and sometimes you find Mare standing beneath it, whispering, not prayers, not requests, just stories. One night she tells you that the land no longer hungers, but it does remember, and memory, she says, is the root of everything. On the final day of planting, the wind shifts again, and a flock of birds passes overhead. Their wings silent, their shadows long, and for the first time in months, you look up without fear. You stand at the edge of the new field, the sun higher than it has been in months, its warmth not yet generous, but sincere, the ground beneath your feet still soft from thaw. Your boots caked in memory. Mare stands beside you, holding a basket of seed wrapped in cloth stitched with symbols neither of you fully understand, but both have come to respect. The village moves slowly behind you, like an old story being retold, each step tentative but deliberate. The huts still lean, the roofs still sag, but smoke rises again from chimneys and laughter occasionally slips between doorways like wild herbs growing in the cracks of stone. Rurik finishes carving a final totem, this one larger, placed at the entrance to the field, and marks it with a spiral inside a circle, the symbol that has followed you since the first frost, the symbol of cycles, of hunger and return. Mare plants the first seed, not in silence, but humming a tune you now know is older than her voice, something passed down not through words, but through endurance. You follow, kneel, press seeds into the earth and whisper your father's name, not because you seek him, but because the earth deserves to know what it grew through. The villagers plant too, each according to their rhythm, some quiet, some praying, some crying, none hiding, and for the first time, no one fears being seen. Lyra walks the perimeter scattering salt, not to ward off spirits, but to honor them, and the friar burns small sticks of bitterwood, the smoke rising in thin lines like threads stitching the village back together. Tomas builds a new fence, not out of defense, but to teach his son how to mark space with intention. Even Elswith returns, her hair whiter than you remember, her hands unshaking, and places a bundle of dried herbs at the foot of the cursed tree, not to heal, but to acknowledge. When the planting is done, Mare leads the children in a circle around the stone marker, and together they press their palms to it, one by one, leaving behind nothing but warmth and a hint of color. In the granite's veins that night, no fire is needed, but you light one anyway, not for warmth, but for ritual, and around it you all gather, not to speak of the past, but to carry it quietly in your bodies like marrow. Like memory, you think of all you have seen, the nights with no sound but wind, the marks left in snow by things that do not breathe, the blood spilled for names, the bones traded for warmth, and yet, somehow, you are still here. The famine has not left, not entirely. It clings in the hollows of your ribs, in the shadows behind your eyes, but it no longer rules you. You have walked through it, and you have not become what it wanted. Mare falls asleep beside you, curled in a blanket stitched from 3 others, and you watch the fire until the stars begin to appear. Faint and shy, as if remembering how to be seen, the spiral still spins. The cycle still turns, but now you move with it, not as victim, not as sacrifice, but as witness, as keeper, as one who endured without forgetting what must never be named too quickly. The hunger is not gone, but it is no longer alone, and neither are you. And now, let the fire in this story begin to soften, its glow dimming gently behind your closed eyes as your breathing slows. To match the quiet rhythm of the village that endured, imagine the soil still warm beneath you, the scent of new life rising gently with each gust of early spring air. Let the image of the spiral linger just a little longer, not as something mysterious, but as something simple and true, a pattern woven through frost and root, pain and memory, loss and return. Picture Mare beside you, her voice quiet now, but steady, the kind of steadiness that only comes from having stood through the longest winter and still choosing to plant something in the dirt. Imagine the watchers no longer watching, not because they have gone, but because their purpose has passed, their witness complete, their presence folded gently into the roots of the trees, and the rhythm of your breath. The forest no longer whispers, it simply listens, and the fire inside your hut glows not to keep fear at bay, but to keep memory warm. You rest now in a world that has thinned and grown strange, but which still cradles you gently, and with the kind of wisdom only suffering can teach. Your name, once offered to the dark, remains intact, not erased, not bargained, but spoken again and again until it took root, just like the seeds pressed into thawing earth. Allow your limbs to grow heavy now, your thoughts to stretch wide and drift outward like wood smoke on still air. The story has finished walking, but you do not need to rise. Just remain here, safe, seen, and still. The hunger has counted you, and for once, it passed you by.